I shared this recently that sometimes I'll be researching for good vegan news and an article will pop up that's just so unhinged and grabs a hold of me in such a way that I can't let go of. This article is a prime example of that. It is in the Telegraph and it's called "Pity the Vegans When the Moral High Ground Starts Getting Crowded." It's a short little ditty of an article, and this video practically wrote itself thanks to the absolutely unhinged writing of Mr. William Sitwell. Now, if that name sounds familiar to you, it sounded familiar to me too, and I didn't quite put the puzzle pieces together until I was basically almost done writing the script. And when I did, to say I was completely shook would be an understatement. Here's footage of me right after I made the connection. Oh my god. I'm going to get to that later though, so if you can, hold off on Googling his name for now. It will be worth the reveal. We're going to go through the article first, and then we're going to talk about Mr. Sitwell. And let me tell you, it did not sit well with me when I found out. Okay. I just made that up on the spot. What I will say for now is he is a British writer, and this is of course a British publication, and I feel that all of this brings up this interesting discussion about the differences in attitudes toward veganism in the US versus the UK. It's something I've been thinking about a lot lately. I find it really interesting. I discussed it in a recent Patreon podcast. US versus UK veganism is something that comes up a lot on my channel, especially in Good Vegan News, and actually my biggest portion of my subscribers are US based, but the second biggest portion of my subscribers are UK based. So there's just a lot here, and I thought it would be fun for all of us to discuss this article. And you know how I've said before that certain sentences feel like they can't not be read in a British accent? That's basically this entire article. So to some people's delight, and probably some people's dismay, I will be reading this entire article in my best British accent. I should clarify, my poshest British accent, because after doing a little research, I discovered that the author is apparently a posh British rich boy. Are posh and rich redundant? Do I need to say them both? With connections to the royal family, and some absolutely unhinged takes on veganism. And again, we'll circle back to his biggest claim to fame later, but for now, let's get into the article. Pity the vegans when the moral high ground starts getting crowded. The plant eaters must have choked on their jackfruit to hear that meat eaters can be less cruel and more environmentally protective. So here we go with the trend that will remain throughout the article, which I think is a bit more of a British thing than a US thing, which is to imply that vegans only eat certain foods, and that in and of itself is somehow a punchline. And of course, British journalists are known for their colorful language and descriptors, so we have vegans not just eating but choking on jackfruit, which is interesting because apparently the #1 choking food are hot dogs. And of course we have as the main article photo a picture of avocado toast, which is really an obsession of the British vegan critics.
Do you eat avocados?
Asking the government.
Do you eat avocados?
A leading study from...
Do you eat... It's an interview. You don't just answer different questions. Do you eat avocados?
I eat a plant-based diet, which
Do you eat avocados?
Guess who else loves avocado? Literally every single person I see posting about food on the internet. It's clear that most people love avocado. But sure, pin it on the 1 to 3% of us that happen to be vegan. The turnip munchers are having another bad week. Just for the record, I can't remember the last time I had turnip. You know who does love turnip? Several meat eaters in my life. That's neither here nor there, but really? Turnip is the derogatory food choice here. Plant-based sales are dropping, brands have been withdrawing products, and Sainsbury's has just signed a 10-year deal with their main purveyor of pork that, say the supermarket and piggy provider, sets new standards in welfare as well as giving some much-needed stability for farmers. This has come up in multiple of my videos over the last year. There's this incorrect rhetoric that plant-based food sales are declining, when in reality, it's sales of plant-based meat alternatives specifically that have declined, possibly due to heavy oversaturation in the market over the last few years, but all metrics that I've seen have pointed to plant-based food sales overall increasing. It means more space for farrowing, more room for mother sows and their little piglets, 24/7 monitoring by new AI tools, and general improvements in welfare. It puts vegans in the same awkward position that Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch keeps finding herself in, having her territory occupied by Labour, as Mrs. Badenoch must applaud Sir Keir Starmer's plans to cut benefits, slash the number of civil servants, and banish quangos, so vegans must surely herald a supermarket's aim to improve animal welfare. Look, I'm way too American to even pretend to comprehend what any of this means. Like, as far as I'm concerned, this may as well not even be English. But British politics aside, he's talking about some animal welfare changes that Sainsbury's, which is a major UK supermarket chain, has recently committed to. And essentially what Mr. Sitwell is saying is that we should be feeling awkward, should be having a bad week, should be choking on our jackfruit as a result of this news. And I took a look over the new welfare standards and was not particularly impressed. I think it's kind of how most vegans feel about animal welfare improvements. Like, sure, it's an improvement, but when the bar is in hell and you raise the bar a little bit, it's still hell. So it's hard to get too excited about, and despite Mr. Sitwell's claims, I surely don't feel compelled to herald anyone or anything. I actually had to look up what that word means, because I've never heard it outside of A Christmas Carol. Also, I looked up what a quango was because I just couldn't help myself, and upon reading about them, I'm more confused than ever. What a waste of a delightful word. I was hoping it would be some kind of hybrid between a kiwi and a mango, but alas, nothing can be fun anymore. For the vegan's happy place, when not chomping on jackfruit and slurping nut cream, is in being horrified by conventional farming. Okay, so here we go again. So I guess someone has given us the Heimlich, we're no longer choking on the jackfruit, we're now back to chomping it. And my preferred cream to slurp is oat, but you're right, you got us there. Slurping cow cream is way less disgusting than nut or oat. Also, he hyperlinks the word conventional farming to another Telegraph article titled, "Watch, shoppers ram vegan protesters with trolleys in Sainsbury's meat aisle." Not really sure what that has to do with conventional farming, but I guess William's just titillated by vegan protesters getting rammed. Nothing gets the plant eater up in the morning quicker than the dangled prospect of a nice juicy photo of the horror of animal farming, or better still, fresh video footage of the gory details of enclosures and slaughter. They can then properly rent their hemp shirts, paint new slogans on placards, and gear up for a nice demo or some fun milk spilling in Waitrose. William, I'm shocked that you dare mention Waitrose. A little bit of foreshadowing there. So here we have this stereotype that all vegans are obsessed with watching and sharing graphic footage. While there are some animal rights activists that do utilize graphic footage in their activism, I would say a majority of vegan activists and vegans don't do that. I personally do not do that. I do not agree with forcing people to watch traumatic footage without their consent. That's just how I feel, but I think there's a lot of vegans that feel that way. So to act like we're somehow titillated by graphic footage is really quite unhinged. And furthermore, when we're talking about graphic footage, it's not that it gets us going. It's that we're hoping it'll get you going. And by get you going, I mean horrify you that this is what you pay for directly every time you stuff your pie hole. On a clear day with a good pair of binoculars, you can see them up there on the moral high ground, chuntering about climate change and cruelty. Me? Chuntering? I don't even know what that means. How many words do you guys have over there? Thus, all seems quiet from the vegan enclaves this week, as they suffer from the brutal assault of a supermarket announcing not just better welfare standards, but a pledge that Taste the Difference pork will be net zero by 2029. Also announced is more investment in trials into the reduction of soya in feed, what Sainsbury's call a focus on more sustainable cereal feedstocks. I think everyone knows that we're committed to X happening by Y year is one of the oldest virtue signaling marketing tactics in the book. Look, I can announce I'm committed to having kombucha on tap in my basement by 2028, but that doesn't mean it's going to happen. My basement currently looks like it could be the set of a snuff film, and sourcing a kombucha keg is a bit difficult. But sure, 2028, here we come. So until it actually happens with Sainsbury's, it's little more than writing a check they potentially can't cash. Take that, says Sainsbury's, as it surreptitiously steals the vegan's bamboo shoes, eyeing indeed the full sustainable corn or apple-based wardrobe by adding these initiatives to its other pledges, such as sourcing eggs from 100% free-range woodland roaming hens, improving chicken welfare, and introducing a beef range with lower carbon footprint. I think we've really jumped the shark here. Now they're taking away our clothes with their empty promises? Also, I have to give old William some credit here for being pretty evolved in his vegan clothing critique. Like, usually the go-to criticism of vegan clothing is it being hemp or plastic. But Bill at least has the wherewithal to realize we're fucking with apple leather now. As vegans themselves refuse to ban avocados from their diet, the mass-produced fruit is responsible for deforestation, using up scarce water supply, and is detrimental to bees, they find themselves in the uncomfortable position of having to hear meat-eaters claim that their food habits are less cruel and more environmentally protective than that of plant fetishists. I do think someone has a fetish here, but I think the call may be coming from inside the house. Implying any meat eater could claim their food habits are less cruel and more environmentally protective than a vegan's is obviously a joke. It is a joke, right, William? Because I'm starting to worry about you. That moral high ground is getting mighty crowded. Meanwhile, you'll find me happily floundering around at ground zero, staying afloat with my cliched principles of seasonal and local. If it's crunchy, fresh, and tasty, and I know where it comes from, that's good enough for me. Seasonal and local? Crunchy, fresh, and tasty? I'm sorry, it almost sounds like you're talking about plants. Obviously, there is heavy irony in William policing and jeering at other people's food stances and morals when he clearly has a food stance of his own. He sounds like what could be called a locavore, which is in and of itself a moral food stance. And he in fact appears to be doing the same kind of moral high ground chuntering that he's accusing others of. I discussed this more in my most recent Patreon podcast episode, which you can get at the link on the screen. I post exclusive content for the dinner fork tier. Every paid patron gets access to our Discord server, but I was discussing how I find it interesting to observe the differences in vegan hate between the US and the UK. A few years ago, I did a whole video on this called Why People Hate Vegans, which was based on a really fascinating article that goes into all of the history in the two countries and how the vegan hate has evolved over time. My overall take is that anti-vegan sentiment is ultimately worse and more sinister in the US, but in the UK, it's louder and more cartoonish, almost like a theatrical performance, which is ultimately very British. So let me know your thoughts on that if you agree, or where you live falls on that spectrum of vegan hate. I'd actually love to hear about other countries besides these two. These are just the ones that I feel like I'm most familiar with. And just like what can happen with American political pundits, I think with a lot of these British journalists, they feel like they've been niched into this vegan hating space, and at this point it's almost just like a bit that pays the bills. In William's case, he's prolific. He averages about 5 articles a week for the Telegraph. He also writes books, and he doesn't just talk about veganism. He also rallies against wokeness, paternity leave, man hugs, and free museum admission. He advocates for fat shaming and loves ride-on lawnmowers. Keep in mind, I wrote all of this before realizing who William Sitwell was. So let's get to the reveal. If you're thinking this name sounds familiar, his face looks familiar, here's why. Yes, this is the man who was famously fired/quit after a joke about killing vegans. I say fired/quit because he clearly was like asked to leave, but then he came out and was like, I quit, you know, like they allowed him that grace for some reason. And I feel like this is sort of legendary British vegan lore, correct me if I'm wrong, I certainly knew about it. The reason I knew about it was that on my old channel, some of you know, I had a channel prior to Totally Forkable, I had a little series on there called Good Vegan News. It was the original Good Vegan News. It was very different from how it looks today, but that was the start of Good Vegan News. And I actually did this story in a Good Vegan News video, which God only knows why I thought that was a good story to do as the headline story of my Good Vegan News video. But hey, we've come a long way. So yes, of course, I was familiar with this man, his name, his face. I had just forgotten because it's been, 7 or 8 years. For those who aren't familiar with the story, Waitrose is one of the biggest supermarket chains in the UK. They have a food magazine. He was the editor-in-chief of that magazine. Selene Nelson, who is a vegan, had pitched Sitwell a plant-based meal series looking at meat-free dishes. Sitwell replied, "Hi Selene, thanks for this. How about a series on killing vegans one by one? Ways to trap them, how to interrogate them properly, expose their hypocrisy, force-feed them meat. make them eat steak and drink red wine. William, I can only assume you were drinking red wine while writing this email. Which, by the way, it's like, what? Are you confusing red wine with blood? Like, vegans drink red wine, William. Are you okay? In a follow-up email, he added, I like the idea of a column titled The Honest Vegan, a millennial's diary of earnest endeavor and bacon sandwiches. Okay, now I feel personally attacked. He had to bring millennials into this too? So I didn't realize just how spot on I was when I said certain journalists have carved out a niche of hating vegans. I think it says a lot about the culture and industry of vegan hatred in the UK that this man could have this very public fall from grace in 2018 for inciting violence against vegans, and 7 years later is still continuing to get work in mainstream British media as a vegan hater. I also found this video of him being interviewed about Beyond Meat sales being down in August of 2023. Want to watch a few clips because it's pretty telling.
Yet why would vegans want to pretend that they're eating meat? This has always puzzled me. William, I can understand why people may have a moral objection to meat. I don't, but I understand why. But if you do, why do you want to pretend that your tofu is a lamb cutlet?
So that wasn't William, but I got a gripe with this guy too. Like, dude, you literally just answered your own question. Why do they want to make it taste like meat? I can understand the moral issue, but why do they want to make it taste like? Well, because we didn't give it up because we didn't like the taste of it. Why is this this might be one of the worst, this might be one of the worst vegan, perpetual will never die vegan questions for me personally. It just obviously shows the total lack of understanding of veganism. It's not because we're like, we don't like the taste of meat, but we're still gonna eat something that tastes like it. Like, how stupid are you that you think that's what we are doing, you know? But let's hear William's answer.
Well, I think it's partly because people don't want to feel that they're totally isolated. I mean, if you go to a restaurant, if there's, let's say, a fake lamb chop or some fake chicken, then perhaps you can feel part of that group by ordering a sort of fake version of that food.
That's so not the answer, but sure, that's part of it. That's one part of it, right?
But I actually think that, you know, the good old-fashioned natural vegan, who, as you say, is someone who gives up meat, dairy, animal-related products for ethical reasons, wants to be a natural eater. And that's about good, sustainable, locally produced food.
I mean, this guy is clearly deeply enmeshed in some very stuffy, conservative ideals, and therefore it's not that surprising that he's seemingly assigning moral value to the good old-fashioned vegans. Like, he doesn't have a problem with the good old-fashioned vegans, but he has a problem with the new age vegans. And he's clearly completely wrong because he's conflating the morality of not wanting to cause harm to animals with his perceived morality of whole, unprocessed, local food is better than processed. So they're like two different moralities, and he's like putting them together and being like, well, obviously real good old-fashioned vegans want to eat real good local food. Like, no, that's not what veganism is. Veganism, as defined by your countrymen last century, which is the definition that I think most people, at least in the US and the UK, go with, seeks to exclude exploitation and cruelty to animals. Whether they're old-fashioned vegans, whether they're new school vegans, that's what it's about. And while there might be many vegans who also believe in eating whole foods or eating locally, that's not what veganism is ultimately about.
It's more the kind of urban politicized vegan who is keen on badging themselves vegan. That's the sort of person who's buying Beyond Meat, the sort of person who's buying fake meat produced by a 3D printing machine.
You know who's buying Beyond Meat or any other meat alternative of the like? People who like delicious noms. Like, it's as simple as that. I don't know many people who would fork over upwards of $10 again and again just to prove a political point. Sure, some people might want to reduce their environmental footprint, reduce harm to animals, reduce their cholesterol intake, but they're simply not going to continue buying it if it's not good. I don't happen to like Beyond Meat, so I don't happen to buy it, but I do like Impossible Meat and I buy that. So am I one of these urban politicized vegans, according to William?
It's very much a fascist statement. Now, obviously, I wouldn't, you know, I can't speak for any vegan.
Oh, you can't? because you seem to be pretty comfortable with it. It's a short video, the rest of it is just him criticizing ultra-processed food and speaking in favor of local food, which brings up another one of these frustrating boulder up a hill arguments that vegans are constantly contending with, which is that these arguments operate on the assumption that all vegans are only eating processed food all the time, which isn't true, and even if it were, I honestly wouldn't really understand the problem with that. Meat eaters, omnis, carnis, whatever you want to call them, can eat processed food too, and in fact, many do. And vegans can eat only unprocessed foods, and many do. The number of meat eaters in the US and the UK that eat fast food, I can guarantee far outweighs the number of vegans that eat meat alternatives. But separately, hearing him talk in this interview reinforces my notion that his vegan hatred is performatively cartoonish, especially in writing. Because although he says a number of things here that I don't agree with, he certainly seems a lot more measured and reasonable than this article would suggest. So should we pity the vegans as Mr. Sitwell suggests? No. I mean, yes, we should pity them for having to live in a world with such willful ignorance and taunting toxicity perpetuated by people like him. But I speak for myself, and I'm sure many of us, when I say we will not need pity the day supermarket chains decide to actually be more ethical. The day more people decide to join us on the so-called moral high ground. There will be a celebration that day with vegan buffalo wings and kombucha on tap, and sure, turnips and jackfruit and nut cream that we can all slurp together. Like, we want things to move in that direction. Why would we need pity? It's so stupid. Anyway. But I will say, I do pity people like you, William, because you're stuck in an echo chamber of your own creation. You feel you're unable to evolve, or you'll fail to be relevant and stop getting hired. I'd venture to say you secretly love when your publisher sends you to the newly Michelin-starred vegan restaurant and you get to try the food. According to your writing, you seem to really enjoy it, but I pity you that you felt the need to fictionalize your experience and say the food wasn't filling and that you had to eat a steak afterward. I pity you, but I'm not really sure you deserve it, because you don't seem to have much empathy for others, animals or humans. So those are my thoughts on this article. It took me on a wild ride. The writing was so hilariously unhinged that it almost acts as a pro-vegan piece of media. Like, I swear the vegan troll spectrum is a horseshoe. Let me know your thoughts on all of this. Were you already familiar with William Sitwell? What are your thoughts on US versus UK vegan hate? Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed my posh British accent. Subscribe for more. Check out Patreon for even more. A very special thank you to my fancy forks, Claudia, Dindin Masker, and Big Chungus 4526. And I'll see you again soon. Bye!